white box with a stubborn mule pulling a wagon on the front, and it used to sit on a shelf in nearly every home in this country. Chances are your own grandmother kept one within arm's reach of the wash tub. Somewhere along the way, that box got shoved to the back, behind a row of colorful plastic bottles, each one promising to handle just one small job. That box is Borax, and today I want to make the case for bringing it back into your home, and for keeping more than one box of it in your pantry, because it is one of the cheapest, most useful things a household can own. It quietly does the work of a dozen of those bottles combined. My own mother reached for it every single wash day of her life, and once you understand everything it can do, you'll wonder why you ever stopped using it. Before I go any further, let's clear the air, because there is a lot of noisy back and forth online about whether borax is safe. I want to be honest with you about it. Borax is a mineral sodium borate, mined right out of the earth in places like California and Turkey, then ground into that fine white powder you'd recognize from the laundry aisle. Now, the internet loves to shout that it's dangerous, and here's the plain truth, the same truth that applies to almost everything sitting under your sink. Too much of nearly anything can hurt you, but used with a little common sense, borax is every bit as safe and helpful as baking soda or vinegar. It isn't something to be afraid of. It's something to respect and use correctly. So, let's start with using it the right way, and then I'll walk you through everything it can do for you. Quick note before we dive in. I'm Nomi Yoder, and the kind of old household knowledge I'm sharing with you today is just a small taste of what's been passed down in my family. I've put together a much fuller collection of these traditional home methods, and you can find that over at naomiyoder.com. If what you learned today is useful to you, that's where the rest of it lives. Everything my own family taught me, gathered in one spot. Now, back to the borax itself. I watched my mother stand over that wash basin with a box of it close by week after week, and she taught me how to use it exactly the way her mother taught her. That's really the whole reason I trust it. It was tested and proven in real hands, generation after generation, long before anyone online ever had an opinion about it. So let me start with the honest safety talk, because being upfront about that is what lets you use this stuff with confidence instead of worry. Borax is a mild irritant. Nothing more dramatic than that. Breathe in the dust and it'll make your throat and nose itch a bit, so pour it slowly and don't send a cloud of powder into the air. Wear a mask or goggles if that makes you more comfortable. I handle it barehanded myself, and just pour carefully. Keep it away from your eyes. And here's the one rule that matters above all the rest. It is not food, not even close to food safe. So store it up high, well out of reach of small children, exactly the way you'd treat any cleaning powder, and don't let kids play around it. That also means skipping that old borax and glue slime craft. A curious toddler will put almost anything in their mouth. Treated with that same respect you'd give any cleaner, kept high and kept away from little hands, it is a genuinely wonderful thing to have in the house. Now, let's get into everything it actually does, because the list is long. I'll walk through it much the way it's laid out on the back of that old box itself, one use at a time. And the very first, the oldest use of all, is in the laundry. This is where my mother relied on it most, week in and week out. Borax is mildly alkaline, even a touch more so than baking soda, and adding it to your wash water bumps up that alkalinity just enough to help your detergent work harder and to boost the power of bleach on your whites. I've started adding about half a cup to every white load, more than I used to bother with, and the difference in how clean they come out is honestly striking. It also makes an excellent pre-soak for stubborn stains. Dissolve half a cup in a sink of warm water, let the stained item soak for an hour or so, then wash it, as usual, with another half cup added to the machine. It will pull stains out of fabric that plain detergent left sitting right where they were, stains I had genuinely given up on. Some of the tougher ones might take a wash or two more, but they come out far better than they ever did before. It softens hard water too. If your water runs hard, you'll actually feel the change while you're washing. Everything gets a little slicker under your hands, and that's the borax working to ease the mineral hardness, so your rinse comes out cleaner. And it's a genuine odor eliminator. A load that's gone sour and musty comes right back to fresh with a scoop of borax mixed in. That one use alone earns it a permanent spot in your laundry room, and it's likely the use your own grandmother knew best. From there, the household cleaning uses just keep coming, because borax might be the single most versatile thing you can keep under your sink. It works beautifully as a scouring cleanser, doing the same job as those canned soft scrub powders. Make a paste with about half a cup of borax and a little water, or just wet the surface and sprinkle the powder straight on, then scrub with a damp rag or sponge, same as you would with any store-bought scouring powder. I used it on a stainless sink that had been through years of hard use, grimy and dull, and it came out gleaming, cleaner than it had looked in ages. It works the same magic on other sinks, toilets, and shower stalls. Sprinkle it right on the surface and scrub, or work it into a paste to get deep into the grout lines. It'll scour your pots and pans just as well as any canned cleanser too. Here's a use that'll give hope to anyone with a stain they've long since written off, because I wouldn't have believed it myself if I hadn't watched it happen. I had an old cushion, one with real sentimental value, that had carried a dark, ugly stain for something like 14 years. I tried ever touched it. So I mixed up a paste of about half a cup of borax, half a cup of baking soda, and a splash of liquid laundry soap, blending it to something between toothpaste and syrup. Using an old toothbrush, I worked that paste into the stain and let it sit almost an hour until it was nearly dry. Then I scrubbed it out with a brush and warm water, rinsed it thoroughly, and set the cushion out in the sun to dry. That 14-year-old stain lifted clean away. I won't promise it'll erase every stain in existence. Some things really are set too deep for anything to fix, but a borax and baking soda paste, given time to work, will lift far more stains than you'd expect, and that alone makes it worth keeping stocked. A quick word for anyone on a septic system, since I know a good number of you are, and worry about what goes down the drain. I looked into this closely and used the normal way for regular household cleaning in reasonable amounts. Borax does no harm to a septic system. Just don't dump large quantities down the drain at once, and you'll be fine. It handles mold and mildew too, which anyone with a damp bathroom will thank you for. Mix about a quarter cup of borax into a quart of water and shake until it dissolves, then load it into a spray bottle. Spray it anywhere mildew tends to start: the shower, the damp corners, and it clears out what's already there while discouraging new growth. It'll freshen up a sluggish drain as well. And then there are the ants, which, if you've ever dealt with an infestation, you know is a real blessing. Mix 1 part borax with 2 parts sugar, plain and simple, and sprinkle it along the paths where you see them running. The sugar draws them in, they carry the mixture back to the nest, and it takes care of the whole colony. Just keep any bait tucked well out of reach of children and pets, hidden in the places where the ants travel. Same precaution you'd take with any bait. One last use worth mentioning, for those of you running a dishwasher: a quarter cup of borax tossed into the bottom before you start your cycle, alongside your usual detergent, will leave your dishes noticeably sparkling. I don't run one myself, so I'm simply passing that one along for those who do. My own preference is a paste, a rag, and my own 2 hands, no machine required. And that old box still lists plenty more uses right on the label: porcelain, fiberglass, hard water buildup, delicates, china, toilet bowls, a whole list that just goes to show how much one plain, cheap box is really capable of. Now take a moment and think about why something this useful ended up pushed to the back of the shelf and half forgotten. Why you were sold a separate bottle for every single one of these jobs, when one plain box handled them all along. Nobody had to scheme it. It's simpler and sadder than that. There's real money to be made selling you a dedicated stain remover, a dedicated scouring cleaner, a dedicated mildew spray, a dedicated ant killer, a dedicated odor eliminator, each bought again and again in its own bottle. There's no money at all in one cheap box of borax that quietly replaces the whole lineup for pennies. So the flashy bottles got the shelf space and the advertising budgets, and the plain old box got pushed further and further back until it nearly disappeared from memory. And somewhere along the way, people even started calling it dangerous. Not because it ever stopped working, but because nobody profits from reminding you that your grandmother's one cheap box does the job of a whole cabinet of what's being sold to you now. The fix is simple: one inexpensive box, and the old know-how of how to use it properly. Keep borax in your home. Use it in the wash for scouring on stubborn stains, against mildew, against ants, and you'll find you no longer need that whole row of specialty bottles. Keep a little extra on hand too, so that if times ever get tight and the shelves run bare, you've already got something in your cupboard that can clean nearly your entire house. That's how it comes back into your life. One plain box and one old habit at a time, taking the care of your home back into your own 2 hands, off the shelf of bottles. So here's what I'd ask of you this week. Pick one job, your worst load of dingy whites, a grimy sink, or that stain you'd already given up on, and try Borax on it exactly the way I've shown you. Then come back and tell me in the comments how it turned out, whether it beat what the store-bought stuff left behind. I truly love hearing about something saved that was nearly thrown away. And while you're there, tell me your general area and roughly how old your house is. Older homes tend to deal with harder water and damper corners, and that's exactly where these traditional remedies earn their keep the most. So I love learning where and how this works for each of you. And if your mother or grandmother had a use for borax I haven't mentioned here, please share it. That's really what this is all about, passing along what we were given. Next time, I'll show you how to take this same inexpensive box, along with a couple of other plain pantry staples, and make your own laundry soap from scratch, both the powder and the liquid version, so you never have to buy store detergent again. There's an old, honest way to keep a home clean using just a handful of plain minerals and a bit of know-how, and almost none of it comes from a fancy bottle. But this week, start with the one box. Keep it up high, away from the children. Add half a cup to your whites. Mix a paste for your worst stain. Scrub your sink, spray your mildew, bait your ants. And watch one cheap, plain box do the work of an entire cupboard full of what you used to buy. You'll come to understand, just like my mother did at her own wash tub, that this box was never old-fashioned or dangerous, only forgotten and argued over by people who never bothered to learn how to use it properly. Your grandmother knew something worth an entire shelf of bottles. A home kept the plain old way remembers how the women before us cleaned nearly everything with one cheap box of borax and a little bit of wisdom. And that's something we're only just now starting to remember.